We start with possibly the best week ever for President Obama. Howard Fineman's an MSNBC political analyst and the Huffington Post Media Group editorial director. And Jean Cummings joins us as well. She's assistant managing editor for Politico. Let's start with Jean. You haven't been on in a while. Let's recap the week that Obama had. Well, the week before was consumed with Donald Trump's birther barkering. President Obama released his long-form birth certificate, it seems like a million years ago, and then let Trump have it at the White House Correspondents' Dinner.
Mr. Trump recognized that the real problem was a lack of leadership, and so ultimately you didn't blame Little John or Meatloaf. You fired Gary Busey. And these are the kind of decisions that would keep me up at night. Well handled, sir. Well handled.
While everyone was laughing at Trump, the president knew that something much more serious was afoot, already underway, in fact, on Sunday.
Today, at my direction, the United States launched a targeted operation against that compound in Abbottabad, Pakistan. A small team of Americans carried out the operation with extraordinary courage and capability. No Americans were harmed. They took care to avoid civilian casualties. After a firefight, they killed Osama bin Laden and took custody of his body.
Well, that extraordinary news took the president to Ground Zero in New York, of course, last week to honor the victims of 9/11 and also to meet with their loved ones. That same day, by the way, while the president was looking very presidential, 5 Republicans met in South Carolina to talk about being president. Safe to say that his shadow loomed large over that group. Well, the next day, a jobs report showed the third straight month of job growth. Look at it there, 244,000 new jobs, though the unemployment rate did tick up to 9. But the important thing in that report is all the new private sector jobs. The president went to Indiana to promote his economic message, and then it was on to Fort Campbell, Kentucky, to personally thank the Navy SEALs who killed bin Laden. In a taped interview with 60 Minutes that aired Sunday night, last night, the president talked about bin Laden's death, but the message certainly summed up the whole week.
Well, it was certainly one of the most satisfying weeks, not only for my presidency, but I think for the United States since I've been president.
Now, Croft always gets the good interviews. Anyway, let me go right now to Jean Cummings. And I'm putting this together, but you know, I do think weeks can become iconic, and they do have a value beyond how they bump the polls. And later on down the road, those iconic moments are remembered back and forth, and they do tend to add to the sort of the permanent value of a politician. Your thoughts about the last week?
I agree with you, Chris, that this could become a milestone, a turning point in his presidency if things stay on track. I think that the voters got another look at the president. We often talk about and write about how he takes close counsel, how he doesn't react, very emotionally to things and that sort of thing. And what they saw was, a pretty cool customer making a very tough decision. And that lends insight, I think, into his presidency as a whole, especially when people criticize his ability to emote and be warm with voters. I think voters will overlook that if they feel confident in his leadership behind the scenes when it comes to a big call. And this was a very big call that they're going to remember.
Yeah, that's true. And I think, how are your thoughts? Just right up front.
I think Gene's absolutely right. And in talking to White House people, as I was this afternoon, they know that the polls could change. They know all that. But one of them told me, look, I think the voters saw some things about the president as a leader. And those are important to us. And it's important to the president politically for the reasons Gene said. Here's a guy who sometimes is criticized for being too close on the details. This was a case where that characteristic, being close on the details, really mattered. This was a beautifully operated and executed maneuver here that he was closely involved in. Cool, customer, focused. Those are the things people will remember.
Yeah, I thought it was interesting, Gene, you first, the question of the way he played it as the operations chief, in a sense, overseeing the operation. It wasn't just policy. It was execution in this case and how he wanted it done. The president, according to Tom Donilon, the National Security Advisor, very much impresses me these days. I've known him forever. This is a wonderful thing he's working at right now in this role. He said the president only had a 50-50 shot. And I was thinking about whether Osama was in that compound. And I was thinking, compare that to Donald Trump's shot. And this sounds almost ludicrous, but this is the way we were covering the news a couple of weeks ago, Donald Trump. He was betting the president didn't have a driver's license, basically, that he didn't have a birth certificate, that there was something wrong with his very identity. That was a bad bet to make because the president knew everything. And here the president bet a much better bet, a much better gamble, whereas Donald Trump looks really bad now. He was betting against the president being who he said he was, an American. And now here's the president taking a bet as well, more calculated, better odds, but boy, it came out for him. He went bet on black, and it came out black.
Well, it certainly made the president's comments when he unveiled his birth certificate. He, towards the end of his comments, said, "I've got better things to do than this," or words to that effect. And then when I saw what happened, what he was really doing, those words took on much greater meaning. And I think that summed up how much you have political farce in the silly season of a presidential campaign and real governing that has to go on in the White House. All White Houses have to run trains at several different levels. I mean, they were writing a humorous speech at the same time that they were having to plan this incredibly serious and dangerous mission. All White Houses have to pull that off, but the birther thing was such an oddity in the middle of it. I thought it gave really new meaning to his comments that day.
Let's take a look at this, Howard. New NBC poll numbers out today. President Obama's overall approval ratings up to 52 from 49 last month. Not a huge bump. However, approval for his handling of the economy is down to 37. No change there. That's probably driven by the high gas prices. Looking at 2012, 45% now say they'll probably vote to re-elect the president. 30% say they'll probably vote for the Republican candidate. What's interesting in those numbers, Howard, is it seems like although the president's numbers haven't jumped up in terms of probably vote for him from 43 to 43, the number of people really planning to vote for the Republican candidate dropped from 38 to 30. In other words, they're not sure.
Yeah, I think
the moderate to conservative person isn't quite sure where they're at now.
That would comport with what my sense of this is. I think the president probably shook loose some of those weak Republicans, meaning the ones who aren't dead set against him.
Non-haters,
and may have forced them to take another look at him. This is what the White House people were telling me, that take another look at him. Maybe he's got some leadership qualities. Maybe he's got some positives here as a leader. Leave the ideology out of it. Leave that stuff out of it. But you want a strong, smart leader who takes calculated risks, keyword calculated, in defense of the United States at a dangerous time in our world's history. Those people aren't necessarily judging based strictly on ideology, and they'll take another look at the president depending on what happens over the next several months.
Your thought, Jane, on that very point of the president and the way these numbers are moving, as the word I think used was shake loose, for some people on the hard right.
I do think that this is a moment for the White House to try to take advantage of. I think that dedicating a full week to sending home the message about Osama bin Laden was important, and they did that well. However, I don't think we can underestimate the threat of the economy and the recovery. There are very good indicators right now. One that got lost in the mix with all of those breaking news was that retail sales are also up, which is an indication about consumer confidence. Yeah. But it's still very fragile, and the unemployment number is a really dangerous number for the president. And, Chris, just for your show, I went and took a look at some of the states where things are particularly bad, and many of them are the hard-fought states that the president won last time that now have even higher unemployment rates than the national average. They include Florida. They include Ohio. They include Oregon. They include Nevada. All of these states are going to be really, really important. And may I repeat, Florida, and may I repeat, Ohio. So they really need to take a look at it still is, you got to put together the victory. And so the economy is still really, really important.
And the dangerous thing in a lot of those states that Gene just mentioned are that housing prices are falling again. In other words, a big concern here is housing prices. Washington, D.C. is the only metropolitan area where housing prices are going up.
What happens when the housing prices go down? Just explain what that does to people.
Well, what it does is it doesn't give them confidence that they can build something under their family. For the last generation, stable, if not increasing home prices have given people confidence to borrow and also just confidence about the future. It's your wealth. It's the future of the economy. When that's going down, that drags everything down in terms of people's people's view of the future. And in the states Gene mentioned, it is a huge problem.
Yeah, that's the Milton Friedman argument, that the economist who says that you spend according to your wealth, not according to your income.
Exactly.
The idea that your wealth, and I look at these problems. Cash money, that we got the gas prices are up. That's cash you don't have in your pocket. You don't have wealth either.
Well,
you ask the people, they don't have wealth, don't have cash.
Well, they're under no illusions at the White House that this is going to be easy. But if the president can have a couple of moments of leadership on the economy, of the kind that he had in this very dramatic situation. Yeah. But it's a more difficult thing to do. It's a much more difficult thing to have a dramatic moment of leadership on the economy. The economy is a long, slow slog.
I think there's something moving now. I've looked at these 3-month totals, and I think things are moving. I think retail sales, I think it's going to be an interesting summer. People are going to travel. Right. They're going to travel inside the United States. They're going to buy that gas. That's what's going to happen. Anyway, thank you, Howard Fineman, and thank you, Jane Cummings.